Jenny, coach and NLP practitioner, helping introverts step out the shadows, beat fear and self-doubt to live a life that they've designed. There may be big changes going on and that can be really hard to deal with. I help introverts through big life changes so that they can thrive and not just survive. Have you ever hit send on an email and immediately the mind chatter starts? You start to overthink what you've sent. And maybe this happens for every email that you send. It used to certainly for me be every single email. I used to read my emails 6 times at least before I even sent it. And then I would go over and over in my mind as to how it had been received at the other end. And if I don't get a reply, oh my goodness, that's a whole new level of anxiety. And I would constantly be playing the reel in my head. I'd be going over the email in my head, guessing what they might have responded, thinking the worst. And we waste so much time on mind chatter, guessing what the recipient thought before we've even had a chance to have any real information. And we do this in life too. We do this with conversations all the time with our partners, with our families. We're constantly guessing instead of asking. So part of the issue with email or any other written medium really is that we cannot gauge any reaction. There's no visual or audio, which is our main means of communication. So the words are only a tiny percentage of how we communicate. So when we're writing something, we're only conveying a tiny percentage of communication, and we're not getting that in receipt. There's no facial expressions, there's no body language to read. So we're at the mercy of the other person responding in the time frame that they choose. So we've removed all control from ourselves as soon as we press send. So why is it that I much prefer sending an email than making a call? This question came to me as I wrote this article actually. I just realised that the thought of making a phone call has always terrified me, even though I've been a secretary for years and years. I would always avoid making the phone call and use the written word instead. That was my preference. I like writing, it's my comfort zone. I can assess what I've written, I can go back and change it, and you can't do that when you speak to somebody. When you make a phone call or speak in person, you have to respond immediately to what is being said, and you have to think on your feet. And the reality for me is that this has never been an actual problem. It's my feelings around it that create the problem. I'm always happy to respond in a conversation. If I get into a conversation, it's not that much of a problem for me, but I create all these feelings around making the phone call instead of emailing. So how do you feel about it? Do you feel okay about sending emails? Do you prefer emails to calls or calls to emails? When you write something and don't get a response, do you worry whether you've offended somebody or if they don't want to speak to you? And how do you feel when you receive an email? How do you feel when you receive a phone call? These are all questions that it's worth asking and noting how you feel. I know that I feel much more anxious when I receive a phone call than when I receive an email. And I think it's because I can look at it, I can assess it, and I can work it all out. So I know many of my clients struggle with these things, and it's a bit of an introvert's nightmare receiving phone calls and not getting responses and all the mind chatter stuff. And finally getting to the point of sending something and then worrying about what the response might be for days on end is really, really common. So if you think it's just you that does that, it is not. Believe me, many of my clients talk about the same thing. And the mind chatter says things like, what if they don't like it? What if I got it wrong? What if I offended them? What if they think I'm stupid? And the energy that can go into sending one simple email can be immense. So when we're sending dozens and dozens every day, that's a huge amount of energy that we're expending, not just in creating and sending the email, but in after that point of how we then create these feelings around it and how it goes into our mind and starts the talk. Now, this happens to me a lot less frequently than it used to, but it did come up a few weeks ago. I sent an email with some suggestions on it, and I still haven't had a response. And the suggestion was for somebody I'm working with. It's not a client. And I started to worry that maybe they didn't like the suggestion, maybe it was the wrong thing to suggest. And I had asked some questions, and maybe they were just too awkward, the questions. Maybe they weren't the type of questions that this person could answer. So I started thinking about all of these things and all of the outcomes, and worrying that I'd said the wrong thing. Now, the thing is that the suggestions came from a really good place for me. It came from a helping place, and it came from somewhere really genuine within me that wanted to create an ease for this other person. And I'm wondering whether they received it in a way that I sometimes receive things, and started going, oh, but what about this and what about that? And maybe they had those feelings associated with my email that I sometimes get with other emails. So I've decided that I will let it go, and occasionally it just pops back into my head and I think, they still haven't replied. So here are my thoughts on it. Maybe the email's gone into spam and they haven't seen it yet. Maybe they're just massively busy people, which I know for sure that they are, and this is low priority. Maybe they don't like what I suggested and they don't know how to tell me. Or maybe both suggestions are good, but they don't know which one suits them best. And maybe they just want to talk to me about it in person. So what am I going to do about it? I've got a few options. I could send another email chasing them up. I could definitely do that. I could pop around to their offices and ask them what they want to do. And I could call and ask them. Or I could wait until I see them in person at a convenient time to ask them then. So I think I'm going to go with the last option, because I know that it covers several issues for me. I'll be able to read everything from the tone and the body language. I'll be able to explain myself more clearly. I won't interrupt them when I know they're busy with their work, as I'm seeing them anyway. So I know that I've got a meeting set up with these people. It's not like I have to set that up. So I know that I'm going to have this face-to-face contact, so that I know I can deal with it at the time. And that is much bigger progress for me. I've been able to let go of the things behind it and create a really good plan and a strategy for how I'm going to deal with this particular situation. It's not a big thing, but it just, when I was writing this article, and several of my clients have mentioned this sort of thing going on for them, I thought, oh yeah, this has happened to me recently too, but in a much lesser way than it would have in the past. So when you find yourself in this mind chatter spiral, here are some helpful ways to stop it in its tracks. Firstly, read back the email, and you probably know it off by heart now because you might have read it a dozen times, but read it as if your friend is reading it. What would your friend think about it? How would they react to it? Somebody who knows you well and somebody who has your best interests at heart. How would they think about your email? Write out all the things you are currently thinking, like I have listed above, and I was talking about all the things that I thought could be possible. Write out the opposite. So when we do this, not only can we see a different point of view, but we can also see how many options there are. So when we're guessing, there could be 12 options that we're guessing on, and that's really bad odds. So if we're guessing on all these things, then the chances are that we are not correct. Ask what's the worst that could happen. So if this email has been read in an incorrect way, what's the worst that could happen? And what can you then do about it if the worst were to happen? When you notice the chatter going on in your head, and this is a good thing for every type of mind chatter, change the voice to someone else's voice. It could be a supportive friend, or you could change it to something really silly like Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. And when we hear our inner voice with a different tone, it reduces the power of our subconscious mind and how it thinks about it. So that's a good one to do for all sorts of mind chatter. Change the voice in your head, make it sound kinder or make it sound silly, and that will help us to change our subconscious thoughts about it. And take 5 minutes to deep breathe. Now, breathing deeply is always a good way of clearing our thoughts and letting go of some of that pent-up energy that we've got. I talk about tapping all the time, tapping something else that you could do if the internal chatter is really driving you quite mad. Look how much time it is taking up and decide on your action. So there's no point in worrying and worrying and worrying and worrying. Make a decision on what your action can be for that, and know that generally when you've asked what's the worst could happen, that's very rarely what does happen. So I know I've written a lot of this around the perspective of a written email, but you can use these tools for areas such as meetings, chats with friends and family, networking meetings, sending text messages, all of those sorts of things. So this isn't just about sending an email, it's about all of those areas in your life where you do something and you start to then think and overthink and think, oh, what did these people think of me? Did I get it wrong? Did I look stupid? All of those sorts of thoughts. And if it's really stressing you out, it's always better to ask the other person. It's rarely as bad as you think. If you don't ask, you do not know for sure. You are just guessing. And I talk to my clients all the time about stopping our mind reading and guessing, because generally we're pretty terrible at it. So tell me in the comments how you feel about emailing, talking, whether you have that mind chatter going on, and whether this has been helpful for you. Remember to click the buttons, subscribe, like, all of those things that we really want you to do so you can keep in touch with how I help you and other people live the life that they have designed, and so that they can thrive and not just survive.